It's me, your friendly neighborhood bibliothecary, Morgan. Dragon Age of the Veilguard is right around the corner, so we're continuing our read-through of in-game Codex entries from the first 3 Dragon Age games to prepare. Today, we're going to be reading History of Kirkwall, as written by Brother Genitivi in Kirkwall, the City of Chains. So, without further ado, grab your cuppa, make yourself comfortable, and let's start reading. History of Kirkwall by Brother Genitivi, Kirkwall, the City of Chains. Chapter 1. It's difficult for many to comprehend today, but there was a time when Kirkwall was believed to be the very edge of the world. It was Amerius then, named after its founder Magister Amerius Craven, and it was but one outpost on the very fringe of the Tevinter Imperium. There, the Magister's serfs worked the quarries for the jetstone needed for the mighty temples of Minrathous. After a slave rebellion nearly burned the temple to the ground in the great city, it was determined that a center for the slave trade would need to be established well away from the more civilized parts of the Imperium. Though this account may be exaggerated, since the notorious Venarius Isar narrowly escaped assassination at the hands of an elven slave at the time. Because the new slave outpost would become wealthy beyond imagining, competition among prospects reportedly took over 20 years to resolve, resulting in great bloodshed in the frontier, well away from the Archon's eyes. Magister took arms against Magister, mostly in the form of small armies of serfs and mercenaries. Over half the slaves in existence allegedly died in these battles before Amerius was finally chosen, thanks to the marriage of Craven's son to the Archon's daughter. Within a mere decade, the mighty fortress was erected on the cliff where Kirkwall now stands. Over 1 million slaves passed through its gates before the Imperium eventually fell, an unimaginable number by today's standards. The Craven family itself became patrons of the next 3 Archons, and was one of the driving forces behind the extension of the Imperial Highway into the Ferelden Valley, a move that would cost them considerable political influence after the resistance of the Alamari tribes. During its height, Amerius was a jewel to rival the mightiest of the imperial cities, and the greatest center of civilization outside Tevinter. Chapter 2. As the Imperium's borders slowly receded after the devastation of the First Blight and the subsequent barbarian invasion, many outposts in the area, known today as the Free Marches, were cut off from centers of power. Numerous warlords tried consolidating the region into a single kingdom, but resistance prevailed. Amerius held out for almost a century until it fell to a slave revolt in 25 Ancient. It was not the first such revolt Amerius suffered, but it was the last. It started when an Alamari slave named Radin began earning popularity and power by pushing for better conditions. Radin's growing influence prevented the Magisters from touching him, but eventually they had him poisoned. Furious, a group of Radin's supporters stormed the gallows and were massacred, and so began a bloody year-long rebellion. The city burned, and wealthy Hightown was sacked. The Magisters hung before cheering crowds. Amerius assumed the new name of Kirkwall, Kirk meaning black, after its jetstone cliffs. The new city plunged into anarchy for over a decade, and its defenses fell into ruin. Kirkwall has been conquered many times since, the city's own independence suffering since the freeing of its slaves. Chapter 3. The Qunari first thundered into Kirkwall in 756 Storm during the last of the new Exalted Marches. The collected nations of Thedas were attempting to drive the Qunari from the northern mainland once and for all. Qunari armies were on the retreat, but in a desperate gamble, their fleet circled around the Amaranthine coast and landed a great force near the Marcher city of Ostwick. Their plan was to overwhelm the Marcher cities of Starkhaven and Kirkwall, Starkhaven to block the roads leading north, and Kirkwall to block the ships on the Waking Sea coming from Orlais, all in an effort to deny supplies to the Thedas armies assaulting Ravane. The attack on Starkhaven eventually failed, but Kirkwall was attacked in a daring night raid where the Qunari used their Leash Cerebos mages in an unprecedented display of sorcery. The walls were torn down and the city was taken, and for the next 4 years Kirkwall endured the most brutal occupation in its history. Writings from that time are scarce. It was not until after the city was freed that the Qunari's deeds came to light. Children taken from families, forced conversion to the Qunari religion, and brutal labor camps. It's ironic that the old slave quarters of Lowtown, still intact after centuries, provided the perfect means for the Qunari to control the city's people. When the famous Orlesian chevalier, Sir Michel Lefebvre, rode into the city after finally defeating the Cunari defenders, he wrote, "Kirkwall is full of people with empty eyes that have had all independent thought driven from them." When Lefebvre was appointed the city's first viscount by the emperor in 760 storm, he made it his mission to undo the religious conditioning. The Lefebvre bloodline remained popular enough that when the city finally rebelled against Orlesian rule in 805 Blessed, Viscount remained the enduring title for Kirkwall's rulers despite its origin. Chapter 4. The Threnhold family assumed its foreboding control of the city on the very onset of the Dragon Age, less than a week after Merrick Theron retook the Ferelden throne from Orlais. Since this was followed by a civil war in Antiva, the much-maligned Three Queens era, and a coup in the Tevinter Imperium, many thought that the Dragon Age would bring devastating change. Perhaps this was a hasty estimate, but it was true for Kirkwall. Viscount Chivalry Threnhold was a vicious thug who took power through a campaign of intimidation, and his son Perrin, who succeeded him in 914 Dragon Age, was even worse. Taxes were crippling, and Perrin Threnhold used the ancient chains extending from the Twins standing at Kirkwall's harbor, unused since the new Exalted Marches, to block sea traffic and charge exorbitant fees from Orlesian ships. The Empire threatened invasion following the closure of the Waking Sea Passage, and for the first time the Chantry used the Templars to pressure the Viscount. Until that point, the Templars had done nothing to counter the Threnholds, even though, as the largest armed force in Kirkwall, they could have. Knight Commander Guyleon's only written comment was in a letter to Divine Beatrix III. "It is not our place to interfere in political affairs. We are here to safeguard the city against magic, not against itself." The Divine, as a friend to the Emperor, clearly had other ideas. In response, Viscount Perrin hired a mercenary army, forcing a showdown with the Templars. They stormed the gallows and hung Knight Commander Guyleon, igniting a series of battles that ended with Perrin's arrest and the last of his family's rule. The Templars were hailed as heroes, and even though they wished to remain out of Kirkwall's affairs, it was now forced upon them. Knight Commander Meredith appointed Lord Marlowe de Mar as the new Viscount in 921 Dragon, and she has remained influential in the city's rule ever since. That was the History of Kirkwall by Brother Genitivi. Thanks so much for joining me, and until next time, I'll see you later. But be sure to come back and visit the Bibliothecary.